Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, Trump, he is trying to build more detention centers. And detention centers, believe it or not, are just as lucrative money wise as the prison system. It's just another extension of the prison system, if you ask me. And it's another way to keep people incarcerated or, and to keep people paid who run those systems. The same people who run the prison industry are in cahoots with opening these detention centers because it's more money. So let's get into this article, and it's sad because to be honest, mostly the majority of people that are incarcerated or in detention centers are Hispanic and Latino, and it's usually Hispanic, Latino, and blacks, and or people who are they're black, Latin. It doesn't matter where you're from. They're usually the ones that end up in these detention centers or these prisons. So either one. And so Trump's controversial immigration policy stirs opposition to the new detention centers. This is by Caitlin Dixon. And so this just came out. And so look at all this land here. So it's an open land near Dwight. Okay. So which recently approved an annexation and rezoning for the parcel, part of which could be used for immigration detention centers. So the Trump administration plans to expand its long-term immigration detention centers, caps the capacity to the interior of the countries, or the yeah the I'm tongue-tied. The country is meeting resistance from advocates, lawmakers, and even some corporations in the Midwest. So it looks like Illinois. That's what it looks like. Dwight, I believe it's Dwight, Illinois. I can barely see it. So where the government hopes to locate the new facilities. So, according to the document posted in the government website that lists federal business opportunities, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is better known as ICE, is actively soliciting proposals from prospective contractors to open and operate detention facilities capable of housing 1,000 immigrant detainees within an 80-mile radius of ICE Chicago Field's office. So, and another to the house of the estimated about 500 detainees within a 100-mile radius of the agency's field office in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so the window for the responses recently closed regarding the similarly worded proposal request for a contract detention facility into the House an estimated 600 males within 150 miles of the Detroit field office. So they want to build multiple facilities is what it's looking like here. So ICE has identified the need for immigration detention centers within the Chicago, Detroit, St. Paul areas of responsibility. And a spokesman, Matthew Burke, told Yahoo News in an email, those areas are of responsibility or the jurisdiction covered by the three field offices alone stretches across 13 states from Ohio to Kansas and up to North Dakota and Michigan. So that's the Midwest for sure. So Burke went on to clarify that the need is not necessarily specific to requirements in those areas, but rather detention services in Chicago, St. Paul, and Detroit would be part of the agency's overall detention strategy. But the effort has posed a political, practical, and ethical conundrum for a number of communities, including some conservative cities where Trump remains popular. So is some of the pushback is not in my backyard sentiment. That's what it is. So they don't want those detention centers. It's like an eyesore. And also, if somebody tries to escape as well, but the opposition also reflects the unpopularity of the administration's immigration agenda and even the fear of driving away immigrants who are important to the local economy. So people who are already like immigrants and they've gotten their citizenship, or maybe they're on their way to citizenship and they're working in those areas, it looks bad. It's like a reflection of something negative. So, a bill that would ban construction of the privately run federal immigration detention facilities has passed one house of the Illinois state legislature. And so, this is what it's looking like. And this is horrible. This is like caging people as if they're not human. And these, you see their children, there's mothers, there's fathers, there's cousins, brothers, uncles. These are people. They're not what they're trying to make them out to be. So migrants gather at a makeshift detention center in El Paso, Texas. And you see how that looks. That does not look like a welcoming place. So on March 27th, so the commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection is calling the situation in El Paso border a crisis and asking for congressional assistance. And so ICE's latest move towards securing a new sources of detention space comes amid continued influx of migrants in the southwest border, where Homeland Security officials have been looking for temporary alternative spaces, like a tent cities commission last week to house and process large numbers of asylum seekers, mostly families, unaccompanied children, as well, who have filled existing facilities beyond their capacity. Though undoubtedly exacerbated by the situation at the border, the move towards expanding capacity in the Midwest is not a reaction to the current crisis, but part of the long term plan to accommodate the increasing numbers of immigrants taken into custody by ICE's aggressive enforcement activities in the interior. So in October of 2017, the agency issued a request for information, which is RFI, from the perspective. Okay, from the perspective, I get pop up ads, stupid pop up ads, so excuse if you can see that. So, from the prospective vendors to the identify multiple possible detention sites to hold criminal aliens and other. Now, do you hear that? Criminal aliens. Just say to hold criminal people, not criminal aliens. Anyway, and other immigration violators in the greater Chicago, Detroit, and St. Paul and Salt Lake City areas. Those four field offices cover 17 states from Nevada to Kentucky. So it was hardly the first time that ICE had set its sights on the Midwest. Beginning of 2011, it sought to consolidate Chicago field office detainees in the purpose of built privately operated prisons. See what I was telling you? So, prison is this is an extension of the prison system. So, replacing the scattered patchwork of the country, or the county rather, county jails in four states. The proposals were thwarted by local opponents and by immigration activists who oppose moves to expand detention beds. So it just opens up the ability for ICE to hold many more individuals, exactly like what I was saying, said Hannah Mansouri, managing attorney of the National Immigrant Justice Center Adult Detention Project. And so this is crazy. So here it is. It says restroom bottom. So this is probably a detention center. It's the Caroline Detention Facility in Bowling Green, VA. I guess it's Virginia. I'm guessing. So I'm kind of bad with some abbreviations. I have to really look at it. So it's a former regional jail, actually. And so it has been contracted by ICE to house undocumented adult immigrant detainees for violations of immigration laws. So it's like an extension of the prison. And it was once a jail, so that's you're in something like it's a jail facility, and they're just using it as a detention center, but still, it's like being in jail anyway. So, according to the data provided to Yahoo News by ICE, as of April 6th, the average daily number of fiscal year 2019 of ICE detainees being held in the Chicago area operations was 1,319. So a population of that Mansouri described as a mixture of people who are apprehended locally, who have roots and get picked up despite having families here, along with folks transferred up to the border and housed here because there's space. But both groups, she predicted, would likely increase. So they're proposing that it's going to even increase even more. They're going to put more people in there. And so it goes on to say that with the opening of 1,000 bed detention center like the one ICE is seeking to build in the Chicago area, responses received by ICE and the RFI, which the National Immigrant Justice Center obtained last year via the Freedom of, which is this is I believe what it says Freedom of Information Act request show a number of companies expressed interest in this opportunity. So if you click on this, you'll see the companies that are supporting this. Anybody interested, which is very scary because you wouldn't believe. But from the they look at it as a money venture, which it's on the backs or the expense of people's lives. So from the country's two largest private prison operators, the Geo Group is one, that's a company which is well known for the prison industry, and the Core Civic Group, to some lesser known companies such as the Richmond, Virginia based Immigration Centers of America, which operates 690-bed ICE detention center, Farmville, Virginia. Requests for information did not necessarily precede contracts, and ICE officially noted, but are simply part of the general acquisition strategy to determine if services can be viably provided in the specific area. So, but to the private prison companies, it was a potential windfall, and they began scouting construction sites. As soon as they see that, they look at it as a money venture. So they said, let's go find some places that we can buy property and we can build more of these detention centers. So scouting construction sites, that's what they were doing, and working to secure the support of the community leaders who were forced to weigh the potential economic benefits against ethical and political considerations. And so in Ionia, Michigan, correct me if I'm wrong on that, a city of nearly 11,200 and about 130 miles of Detroit field office Immigration Centers of America presented the city's officials with a plan to demolish a former state prison and construct. So this was a prison, and now they want to make it into a detention center. It's a brand new project to make a brand new detention center, privately run immigrant detention center in its place. So 600 bed facility, and they estimated it would be 363 jobs. So this is where they hit you with. They say it's job creation, and I don't know if you guys know this, but they keep talking about Detroit. They had been working on this years ago, and they said they wanted to make Detroit act an actual prison state. And so I remember hearing this some years ago, and that they wanted, because the houses were like pretty much a lot of the houses in Detroit you could buy for $1, but you don't want to live in them, and a lot of them were like pretty in bad shape. Like a lot of those houses were in bad shape, and a lot of crime, and a lot of the jobs had left Detroit. Well, this is how they call themselves bringing back the jobs in Detroit. It's not with car factories, it's with detention centers. And so that's the scary part. And it almost seems as though the people who are poor and in poverty or don't have any other options, those are the jobs that are going to be really readily available for them to take in. So the 363 jobs and generate an annual income of 34.5 million in economic impact on the region. which had suffered following the prison's closures in 2009. Still, the proposal left many of the city officials feeling conflicted, weighing jobs against their ethical concerns about large scale detentions of immigrants in the light of the Trump's administration controversial policies such as family separation, though it would ultimately be up to the Ionia City Council. So correct me if I'm wrong if I'm not saying that right. Ionia to decide whether to allow the detention centers to open at all there. So as for the sole bidder for the shuttered State Correctional Facility, ICA, was permitted by the state officials under Republican Governor Rick Snyder to move forward with the idea, of course, with the project last fall. But Snyder was nearing the end of his second and final term in the office at the time. And so, February of this year, newly elected Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer announced her decision to block the sale of the former prison to ICA, citing, among other concerns, that the fact of ICA could not guarantee the facility would not be used to house adults who had been separated from the children. So other companies have encountered similar kinds of pushback on this issue against their proposal, even in places like Elkhart County, Indiana, where nearly two-thirds of the voters backed Trump in 2016. So you see him pictured here. These are Trump supporters, of course. The crowd cheers for Vice President Mike Pence introduces President Trump at the rally. This is in Elkhart, Indiana, May 10th, 2018. So this is fairly recent. So 2 hours east of Chicago, Elkhart County is the hotbed of Trump supporters, thousands of whom gathered here. The president speaks at a rally where last May, and it is also the center of RV industry as well, whose increased reliance on immigrant labor in the recent years has resulted a growing Latino population. This dynamic played a major role in how the county reacted earlier this year to proposals by the Core Civic Group, one of the country's largest private prison companies, and the leading ICE detention contractor, to build a 1,200 bed immigration detention center in Goshen, a county seat where 30% of the population is Hispanic. So here too, elected officials as well as business leaders had to weigh the potential new jobs and tax revenue for core civic promised against the potential harm an ICE detention center could cause. So the facility gets built and it would be harder to attract new workers and residents, which we very much need to fill the estimated 9,000 plus open jobs in Elkhart County. Goshen Mayor Jeremy, I said Germany, Jeremy Stutzman wrote in an open letter published online late January. Stutzman concluded that any tax dollars generated for the project wouldn't be enough to offset the long-lasting damage such as facilities that would do to the county, but in both terms of perception and the terms of creating unwanted, unwelcome reputation. So shortly after, the Corps civic officials informed Elkhart County commissioners that the company was withdrawing its proposal, a 250,000 square foot detention center. And so that's what they were planning on making, so that there continues to be a lot of really solid organizing against these sorts of plans, even in locations that on paper you would think there would be much of a groundswell of local support in the immigrant, said Julian Lazade or Lazale Laslade. So I may not be pronouncing that correctly. So, but anyway, the civic engagement and policy analysis at the National Immigrant Justice Center. Okay, so just this week, Lazaled or Lazade, I'm desecrating the name, noted ICA withdrew yet another proposal for the construction of a 500-bed facility in the small eastern Wisconsin city of New Richmond, just over 40 miles west of ICE's St. Paul field office in Minnesota. So local advocacy groups have held or had been organizing for several weeks in the effort to urge the state and local officials to reject the plan in the new detention center. So there's sort of some pushback from some people, and then there's some people who are trying to go forward with the idea, and then they're trying to push the idea of job creation as well. These are communities that are rural communities, like the Midwest, and then there are areas that have been impoverished or have been hit with, like a lack of job creation. When they had jobs, the jobs left. And so now they're trying to bring jobs back, but they're doing it in a negative sense. So the more people find out about these proposals, the less they like it, said Fred Taseo, Senior Policy Counsel of Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, which, along with the NIJC, has worked with local advocates on the ground in many of the fights against ICE detention expansion efforts in the Chicago area. So, though most opposition efforts have succeeded so far last month in the face of vocal opposition and local organizers and community members, the village board in Dwight, Illinois, approved a plan by ICA to build a 1,200 bed immigration detention facility in the small town of 77 miles of southeast of Chicago. And so you see a sign pictured here with people look like they're protesting. Demonstrators protested the deportation of immigrants on March 1st, 2018 in Chicago. Okay, so it's hiding what the sign's actually saying, but it probably is not nice. But Dwight, and you see it here, right here, okay? So Dwight's approval of ICA proposed detention center prompted Democratic lawmakers in Illinois to take legislative action, putting forth a bill that would expand the state's longstanding ban on the issue of private prisons to include civil detention facilities like those used to house immigrants in deportation proceedings. Earlier this month, the bill introduced a Democratic Representative Kelly Cassidy of Chicago passed the state house. Though the bill's future in the state Senate is uncertain, so Taseo expressed confidence that lawmakers will be successful in closing the door once and for all for the for-profit immigration detention centers in Illinois. Asked about the possibility that the legislation does become law, ICE will simply build another state or build in another state that is within Chicago's field office region. Taseo noted that other facilities such as Elkhart are also opposed. But I'm hoping that all of these victories on our side are an indication to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security and the administration that detention is not the way to go, he said. Recent actions, however, suggest the administration remains committed to finding more places to house more immigrants. So they're not backing down in terms of the administration per se. But 2 days after the board approved the plan in Dwight, ICE posted an official request for proposal soliciting comprehensive detention services for an estimated 1,000 detainee populations, preferably the 80-mile radius of Chicago field office. So a similar solicitation of 500 detainee facility within 100 miles of St. Paul field office was also posted the same day. So ICE has yet to award any contracts in relation to these solicitations, and even then, such contracts are not scheduled to take effect until June 2020. So congressional appropriations for the fiscal year of 2020 are still pending right now, but ICE has already requested additional funding for the next year's budget to increase its nationwide detention capacity to 54,000 people, y'all. That's a lot of people just to be housing in a detention facility. 54,000. So, however, the latest detention numbers are already beginning to climb. So, right now, they have climbed, listen to this, to 45,274 beds. Congress agreed for FY 2019 fiscal year. That's what that means. As of April 15, the average daily population of ICE detainees for the current fiscal year was 46,000. 636. On April 18th alone, the total was 50,223 individuals were in ICE custody, including 49,548 in adult detention facilities and 675 held in family residential centers as part of the family unit. So earlier this month, ICE issued two additional requests for detention related information, one for potential detention services in the greater Houston area, and others seeking to identify one or more possible detention facility sites capable of housing 600 to 800 adult male and adult female criminal aliens, as they quoted, detainees, and other immigration violators within 50 miles of the Baltimore field office. And so that there you have it. And no, this is out of the Yahoo. This is real news, and this is what is going on in the world. For those of you, if unless you're living under a rock, this is a big problem, and this is what is going on. And they're planning to build more centers. There's pushback, but Trump's administration is the one that is pushing most of this whole thing, and it's starting from in the Midwest. His greatest supporters are in Elkhart, you see the detention centers. They're usually most of your detention centers were old jails. So Elkhart County, Indiana, is where Trump's greatest support, one of his areas of greatest support is, and so, um, and it seems to be a momentum that is going. And then what else is really driving a lot of this is they're going to areas where there's not much job growth, or they had jobs and the jobs left. And so this is how he claims he's going to bring jobs back, but he's doing it in such a way that it's a negative circumstance for someone else, but it's a job for another, you know, somebody who's looking for a job could work in these detention centers with all these people that they're trying to put in there. They're going to need, guards. They're going to need security. They're going to need people to do paperwork and what have you for bringing people in. They're going to need different types of entities of individuals to work those facilities. And so this is the job that he claims that he is going to create. And he said that the main companies are Core Civic Group and the Geo Group. That that is an extension from the prison facilities, and so that's the reason why they're like old jails or old prisons that they have basically refurbished, and they've created facilities for these people that they are just putting there. When some are people who have, I guess, violated, you know. Certain laws, and then others are just people who probably somehow they've crossed over the borders because they're looking for safe haven, but they end up getting caught up into these detention centers, and that's what I was talking about earlier. With all of that, what about the health care of these people? And the food and the money it takes, and the taxpayer money. Have those things come into question? I'm just wondering. Also, they've been talking about the measles outbreak. Are these people properly cared for health wise? Could there be sicknesses and things that are happening in these detention centers that could potentially cause many of these people to die because they don't have enough people to see that these people are cared for? And then just warehousing people. You could be warehousing somebody who's not a criminal with somebody that is a criminal and potentially putting lives in danger. And so these are some things that I'm just bringing out here that could be possible issues that could, really cause some problems, some serious problems for people. And then two, the negative impact that it has on some of these places that have allowed this to go on. But we'll see what happens with that. And then, on top of that, is there other alternatives? Can they find people, a safe haven, like look at people with the kids, you know, what can they do to protect some of the ones that really do need help? So that's just what I'm saying here. It's, it's in my opinion. But anyway, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening.